everybody, and welcome to Comparative Government. I'm Ms. Schafer, and today we're going to be talking about three very prominent nations when it comes to international relations, and that is Russia, China, and Iran. Now, we know already that studying government through the comparative approach involves understanding the complexities of international relations, and that is the political, the cultural, the economic, the historical, and the geographical relationships of various nations. Now today, in this unit, we're going to be discovering those factors about China, Russia, and Iran. And specifically today, we're going to get an overview of those nations, and then we're going to go into their relationships with the West, specifically the good old US of A. Now we're going to be talking about a variety of topics that have been in the news recently, such as the Iran nuclear deal, China's ever-growing economy, and Russia's approach to, well, life under Vladimir Putin. So I can't wait to get started. Let's take a closer look. When looking at China, Russia, and Iran, all three of these nations have unique geographical locations, rich histories, and different political structures, all which influence their relationships with one another and with the West. But before we dive into current relationships with the West, it is important to understand the individual factors noted above that influence these relationships. Now, taking a look at the political structures of these nations, Iran has a theocratic republic, which means the government is ruled by religion. So they have a supreme leader, which is chosen by the assembly of religious experts, and a president that is selected through a democratic election. Now, China is a single-party communist state, so they have a president and a vice president, which are the top leaders of the Chinese Communist Party, and then a prime minister that is then selected by the president. Now, Russia is a federation with a focus on a centralized government, so they have a president that's elected through a democratic election and a prime minister that is then selected by the president. Now, of the three nations, Russia probably has the most interesting geographical location. Well, for one, it has several geographical locations because it's freaking huge. I mean, seriously, look at it. Now, another reason is because for a large portion of the year, Russia's water and land are frozen. And so for a lot of its history, it's been fighting wars and finding ways to gain access to warm water ports. But on the bright side, Russia's rough terrain has really helped it defend itself against bold enemies, just as Hitler and Napoleon. Oh, I'm sorry, what was that? Oh, I'm sorry, I'm being told that was too soon. I'm so sorry, moving on. But Russia also has access to a lot of other natural resources, such as mining resources such as coal and oil, and other agricultural products. And speaking of oil, that is a great segue into Iran. Now, Iran has quite a reliance on its oil and gas exports for its economy. This is because, unlike Russia and China, Iran has limited agricultural resources due to its climate and terrain. Iran's large oil industry has largely contributed to its relationship with other nations. It is also located in the Middle East and near large bodies of water, such as the Caspian Sea and the Persian Gulf, which subjects it to land and water disputes with nations like Russia, Azerbaijan, Afghanistan, and Iraq. Now, China's size and location plays heavily into its relationships with other countries as well, specifically with bordering nations over border disputes and immigration agreements, such as North Korea, India, Nepal, and more historically Japan. China's position in East Asia has also contributed to its current economic relationship with several Western nations, including the US. Okay, y'all, it is now time for, drumroll please, relations with the West. Okay, so we can start with Iran, which has been in the news recently due to the Iran nuclear deal. It was passed this year to control Iran's nuclear program. So after the Islamic Revolution way back in 1979, US and Iran relations have declined a bit. And meanwhile, although most of Iran's military operations are secret, Iran has strengthened its military, they've developed long-range missiles, and a nuclear program. So the 2015 Iran nuclear deal, comes after many years of long talks between foreign ministers of Iran, of the US, and many other world power nations within the UN. So the goal of the deal is to control Iran's nuclear program. Now, many proponents of the deal support it because it will allow US and European nations to control the nuclear program. However, opponents of the deal claim that it will only suspend Iran's nuclear program for about a decade or so. Now let's take a look at the specifics of the deal a little bit further.
With Iran, diplomats meeting in Vienna, Austria, announced the deal about 2 hours ago.
Now, this agreement is designed to stop Iran from making a nuclear weapon for at least 10 years. In exchange, the United States and other Western nations will lift economic sanctions on Iran. Those sanctions would return if Iran breaks the agreement.
So President Obama notes that although the deal has been made, it does not signify trust between the U.S. and Iran. However, it does remove several economic sanctions imposed by the UN as long as Iran complies with the provisions of the deal. So as we move forward in the unit, we will be discussing the deal in more depth and the historical implications behind Iran's relationship with Western nations. Okay, next up is Russia. Now, after the end of the Cold War, relations between the US and Russia improved. As the Soviet Union fell and Russia passed a new constitution in 1993, the nation began moving towards more democratic practices and a free market economy, as President Yeltsin was elected. But since then, the nation has been considered a hybrid system with both democratic and authoritarian characteristics. However, in recent years, since the current president, Vladimir Putin, has taken over, the nation has begun to convert back to a more authoritarian system, with a focus on developing a stronger military and weapons arsenal. Now, as this shift has taken place, many people have raised the question of whether the US and Russia are headed towards a new Cold War.
Defending against Vladimir Putin's Russian military aggression is about to get harder. The head of NORAD, the North American Aerospace Defense Command, warning a new generation of Russian cruise missiles could strike critical military radars and missiles inside the United States.
The development of the cruise missiles that they have that have a very long range, that from eastern Russia, they can range critical infrastructure in Alaska and in Canada that we rely on for a homeland defense mission.
In the last month, several U.S. officials publicly sounding warning.
Russia's provocations are only more worrisome in light of Vladimir Putin's intense focus on building up and modernizing Russia's military forces.
So as we move forward, we'll be keeping an eye on U.S.-Russian relations and what it could mean for the future of these two nations. Okay, we will end our overview today with China. So ironically, as the Cold War raged on throughout the later 70s and 80s, US-Chinese relations were pretty good because the Chinese were kind of a stabilizer in the East because China did not have good relations with Russia. Now, as the US and China still agree today on many important issues, many people wonder if the US and China can peacefully coexist as they compete as top dogs in the global economy, especially now that China has officially surpassed the US in many ways for the #1 spot.
When China's GDP, adjusted for purchasing power, will hit $17.6 trillion to the U.S. economy's $17.4 trillion.
How fast is China growing at this point?
The Chinese economy is growing at the slowest it's grown in a generation, which is just over 7%. U.S., we'd kill for 7% real GDP growth. But
Together, the U.S. and China account for fully 1/3 of the global economy.
So some say that the countries will be able to coexist because they already agree on many current issues and they are both economically dependent on one another. But others say that the relationship may devolve into conflict because their individual allies already cause conflict. For example, China's relationship with North Korea and general competition in U.S. domestic markets. Now, as we go further into the unit, we will discuss exactly what China's economic growth means. We will also further our understanding of comparative governments by exploring Russia, China, and Iran, each in more depth, and also examining other exciting countries such as Mexico, Nigeria, and Great Britain. Until then, this has been another thrilling lesson in comparative governments. I'm Ms. Schafer. See you next time.